So first of all, I just wanted to mention on behalf of the team that we were very impressed by the quality of the people that we worked with in the Estonian public administration, and we hope that there will be some agreement among the people hearing this report, or that they'll recognize some of the views that they expressed to us over the course of the interviews. And overall, the impression that we had was that there are many people who are very capable, who understand the issues and are ready to do their job. And what they're simply looking for is some frameworks that enable them to work better together. And so in a way, this is a structural change that is needed, not so much about an overall reinvention of the public administration. The first concept that I wanted to talk about is that of the whole of government, and Mr. Marcel has already spoken a bit about what it means to have a single government approach. From an OECD perspective, what we see is at the center of this diagram, the political and administrative coordination mechanisms that allow coordination within the public administration to share information. However, oftentimes people just focus on that, and there are many other components in a public governance approach. Those include the formal mechanisms, processes, legal frameworks, for example, that require legislation to be consulted before it goes to the cabinet. There are also performance management systems, which provide outcome measures that require input and cooperation of multiple sectors to discuss and to figure out what their contribution is to achieve overall outcomes. There is an informal element, which is how individual people understand their role within the public administration and their contribution to it. And this is very much driven by the leadership within the public administration and by public service values. And finally, these are all bounded by the political, social, and administrative accountability that the public administration has. Now, why is it important to think about how these different parts fit together? First of all, it improves the policy coherence of what is produced by the public administration. It improves the use of the resources. As has been argued earlier today, there are limited resources, there's a more constrained fiscal environment, so how do you do more with the same or less? Thirdly, it's about promoting synergies that develop when you bring multiple stakeholders together, because with more complicated issues nowadays arising, most of them do not fit within the purview of a single sector. Many people from different approaches have to work together. And finally, it's about delivering seamless services from a citizen-oriented perspective. And so how do we break out of our silos of the interests of our respective organizations and think about the global needs of our citizens? So to deal with each of those elements of this chart that I just showed you, as mentioned in the last presentation, small states tend to have a large degree of informalism. And this is the case in Estonia. Now, there's some big benefits to this, as Mr. Marcel pointed out. Information tends to get shared very quickly through informal networks, and individuals have a lot of possibility of getting things done. In order to make these elements of the Estonian public administration run better, however, you also have to pay attention to the soft levers that need to be strengthened in terms of clarifying expectations and goals, channeling the individual leadership, and communicating overall messages. So while I will talk a little bit more about the formal arrangements, I think it's important to start with those informal elements and what needs to be done to improve how they work within the Estonian context. First of all, we identified a need for a stronger stewardship role for the center. It's important to define what stewardship means, because it's not about directing or controlling from the center, but about guiding and coordinating work that needs to be done still by the rest of the public administration through the ministries and agencies. So the role of the center is to provide the frameworks, the incentives, the support, the supervision that's necessary to establish the responsibility for outcomes. So it's setting expectations, setting some rules, and then enabling the administration to get along to do that work. This implies, in part, clarity from the center about what its expectations are, but also making information available and communicating it to the rest of the public administration in order to guide it and to bring it along, both within the public administration and also with the broader society as a whole. This involves, in part, improving the information, for example, on the rationale of government decisions, putting in place individual staff management system to help shape the individual performance of staff, channeling leadership in order to focus individuals on how they can contribute to horizontal objectives. At the same time, there is need for some formality or some formal mechanisms and guidelines as well to shape what is being done. Horizontal initiatives do take place in addition to the informality within the Estonian public administration, but they fall short on establishing accountability for delivering on horizontal initiatives. Let me give you some examples. We've seen issues, or we've seen areas where horizontality has taken place. For example, with the regional strategy. This is something that encompasses all of Estonia. Yet at the same time, there was insufficient consultation and participation in the development of that strategy, so that once it came out, even though it was of very high quality, there wasn't that ownership of the strategy, which therefore would take it as far as it needs to go in terms of implementation. At the central level, when we look at the shared services initiative, we also see very good thinking at the center, but perhaps this could have been broadened up in terms of the implementation to bring on board all of the different sector ministries that are responsible for the implementation of it, and therefore would speed up and help with the implementation, because we're hearing many problems on how this is implemented at the sector level. Our recommendations on how to improve this would be to supplement the informal networks with horizontal working groups that can take responsibility for delivering on common objectives. It's important to note here that when we talk about the responsibility for delivery, it's both for an individual body to deliver on an agenda, but it's also for a working group, a group of ministries that together are helping to deliver that. So you need to bring the process along, but with group accountability. This also requires some standards and templates that help to share information and to reduce rework. Most formal procedures in Estonia date back to the early or mid-90s, and the needs of the public administration and the circumstances have changed since then, but we've seen that many of those procedures have yet to be modernized and brought along. Part of this is about reducing the barriers to whole of government work, both in terms of the resources within the public administration, in terms of the human resources, and also the machinery of government, or the structure of the public administration. In order to address this, we saw two areas where the public administration needs to focus its attention. First of all, in terms of modernizing the HR planning and broadening it so that it can take into account the whole of the public administration. Doing HR planning at the whole of government level gives a small administration, such as Estonia, greater flexibility by enlarging the pool of talent, but also more predictability as changes are less ad hoc, and as so that ministers can reform the way they work without being punished by across-the-board cuts. We think that taking this more whole-of-government approach also helps to, would require workforce planning, undertaking capability reviews, modernizing and harmonizing public sector remuneration, and establishing a rotation and secondment scheme in order to improve the mobility within the public administration. In terms of the structures, there's a need to amend the Government of the Republic Act to enable the machinery of government changes so that there's more flexibility for each government to change structures as it sees fit, and also to utilize task forces to be able to focus staff on new and upcoming challenges. All of these issues in both the HR area as well as structure of government could benefit from designating a responsible body for the development of public administration work on behalf of the public administration as a whole.